This week's episode of the ArtTactic Podcast is sponsored by ArtBase. Are you managing an art collection, an artist studio, or a gallery? Is it time to bring your collection management skills up to a professional level? We think so. Well, ArtBase is the right software to manage your art business. ArtBase allows you to track your artworks and contacts in an easy-to-use, powerful database. You just enter your data once and use that data to generate reports, offers, contracts, and much more. They've got a brand new version out with a whole new look that can be used on the cloud from any location on any device. So what are you waiting for? Go to artbase.com now to learn more and be sure to mention ArtTactic for a 15% discount. Over the past 12 years, the ArtTactic Podcast has grown to be a leading art market podcast. Each week we share an exclusive in-depth interview with a key art world insider. As we move into a new phase of programming, we want our broadcast to be listener-supported and create content that you want to hear, not what we think you want to hear. You can support us by visiting contribute.to/arttactic. Thanks for listening to the ArtTactic Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Green. Well, we're really pleased to have you joining us for an annual tradition on the podcast. It's the end of the year episode. If we look back at 2021, COVID really persisted throughout the year, but I would describe it as a resilient year, especially for the art world. We have in-person art fairs again, we're able to travel around the world again to see art, gallery shows are back to having openings, artists can host studio visits, auction houses have let people return to bid in person. I think there's a lot to celebrate about this year. And I want to personally thank each of you for listening and supporting the podcast. We started this podcast in 2009. I remember having to explain to our first several guests what a podcast is. And here we are in 2021. We set a record for the most number of downloads and listens in a year. And it was especially meaningful for me and exciting to meet so many of you at various art fairs and events throughout the year. We're looking forward to an exciting 2022 on the podcast. We can't wait to share some of the guests we have in store. I just want to say thank you so much for supporting us over the years. In this week's episode, our end of the year episode, we're joined by Benjamin Sutton, editor of the Americas of the Art newspaper. Benjamin helps us reflect on the past year, identifying and dissecting some of the most significant moments, trends, and winners of the year in the art market. We hope you enjoy the episode. We want to wish everyone a happy holidays and a happy new year. See you in 2022. Ben, thanks so much for coming on and joining us for this special end of year episode.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. There's a lot to cover this year.
Definitely. It was a unique year, and it was also just nice to see certain aspects of the art world return to normal. So let's just jump right in here. What would you say were some of the biggest moments of the art market in 2021?
Where to start? I mean, I think the biggest thing has to be NFTs, and the sort of poster child of that trend has been remains the Beeple sale. His piece Every Day's the first 5,000 days selling for 69.4 million back in March at Christie's. I think that really signaled the arrival of NFTs, and certainly there was a lot of skepticism and head scratching and disbelief in the immediate aftermath of that sale. But I think everything we've seen since has really confirmed that category and that form and the buyers and sellers of NFTs are going to continue to be a force in the art market. The auction houses have really doubled down on this. Phillips did that project with PAC. Larva Labs, CryptoPunks keep coming up for auction. Fuocious had a sale at Christie's that did far surpassed expectations. And then you've seen your more sort of traditional artists dipping their toes into the NFT space, projects by Urs Fischer and Lucian Smith and others. So I think NFTs really were of the big moments this year. I think that was really the biggest and most sort of profound change we saw this year. And then as the year wore on and as the auction houses got more comfortable dealing with NFTs. Then you saw the galleries doing the same. By the end of the year, Art Basel, Miami Beach had a whole sort of corner of the fair devoted to NFTs. And then really interestingly, I think you saw the kind of the movement in the opposite direction, with certain NFT collectors gravitating over to kind of more traditional fine art forms. Obviously, the most conspicuous example of that is Justin Sun, who's a crypto investor who bought a $20 million Picasso, and he bought the $78 million Giacometti from the Maclo sale, and as far as I understand, is putting both of them into a fractional ownership crypto fund. So I don't know. I think in so many ways, NFTs and the people who collect them have really just, and the artists who make them have just completely, not completely, but very fundamentally transformed the art market this year. So that's far and away my top moment. It's not really a moment, I guess.
Well, it was definitely the biggest storyline of 2021, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be very curious to see which of the other galleries get into it and how it continues to evolve. And I think there's a lot of volatility still in not just the NFT market, but cryptocurrencies in general. And I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens to the NFT market, especially as sort of more regulation comes in. The US government's really looking into that now. So I think it'll be interesting once some of those factors that have kept maybe more cautious collectors out of the NFT market are kind of stabilized. I'll be very curious to see what kind of influence that has in the coming year and beyond.
And so as we look back on the art market over the past year, who would you identify as some of the biggest winners?
I think in general, I think the auction houses have sort of come out of the year really strong, and Sotheby's especially. I think they seem to have adapted to the moment much better than other sectors of the art market, especially galleries and fairs, which are so dependent on sort of a brick and mortar interaction. I think we saw this starting last year in 2020, coming out of the immediate sort of lockdown of the pandemic in the spring and summer of 2020. All three of the major auction houses, Christie's, Sotheby's, and Phillips, organized, pretty successful, if a little sort of touch and go virtual auctions. And I think all three have really perfected that formula this year and to great success. So I think I would say all three of them have been big winners, but within the three, I think Sotheby's has really done a very impressive job of kind of leading the charge. And you see that in their the year-end figures that all three auction houses released in the last 10 days or so. Before going into the pandemic, Christie's was always slightly ahead of Sotheby's, and now that dynamic is kind of reversed. And I think Sotheby's really has done a pretty impressive job of really kind of nailing that sort of TV studio evening sale presentation. They obviously got a couple of really major consignments as well, most notably the Maclo collection that they started selling in November. So yeah, I think Sotheby's is definitely kind of the big winner, but the auction category as a whole has really kind of pivoted impressively this year, I would say. The other big winner, I think, and this is maybe not to keep harping on NFTs, but I think early NFT collectors, the folks who really jumped in with both feet at the start, I think are really in an incredible position right now, and not only financially, but obviously the sort of bragging rights of being able to say that you were in on the ground floor is not nothing, especially in a very kind of social kind of subculture. So I don't know. I was interviewing a collector a few months ago, Pablo Rodriguez Frail, who's a big NFT collector. He has a lot of pieces by Beeple and Refik Anadol and a number of the other kind of artists who've really staked a claim to the NFT market at the top level. And I was talking to him about this Beeple piece that he acquired in October of 2020. This piece called Crossroad, and he at the time spent what seemed like a somewhat ridiculous amount of money on it, which is the Ethereum equivalent of $67,000. And 4 months later sold it for $6.6 million, or the equivalent of $6.6 million. So I think there's a lot. If you're willing to sort of track all the blockchain transactions, there's a lot of big wins for people like Pablo, who were really really game to get into the NFT market early on, and who really believe it. I think a lot of them are not necessarily selling everything they have. I think there's a lot of those early collectors who are really passionate about the form, and it'll be interesting to see kind of how that type of collecting and that attitude toward collecting NFTs evolves in the coming years.
Yeah, that's a pretty spectacular return on investment there.
Yeah.
And so if we transition to the actual art being made over the past year, what trends in art would you say define 2021?
Yeah, I think as I was sort of stepping back and looking at the year, I think there were three major trends that I sort of could see. I think actually one, interestingly, is almost kind of in reaction to the NFT moment, which is this kind of renewed appreciation. And I think this probably actually started before NFTs and has more to do with the lockdown in 2020 to some extent, and people sort of wanting tactile things around them in their home while they're experiencing life primarily through their screen. But I think there really has been this kind of embrace of sort of textural, tactile works, art that is, for lack of a better term, employing sort of craft materials and techniques, or sort of harkening back to movements like post-minimalism or the pattern and decoration movement. I feel like I've seen a lot of that type of work this year. For instance, there was actually a fantastic solo booth of pattern and decoration artist Tina Giroir's work, these incredible beaded tapestries at Art Basel Miami Beach, this really like stunning solo booth with Annette Hebke Gallery from LA. But I think you're seeing, like, sort of across the board, there's a lot of renewed attention for textile artists. Friedman Gallery here in New York had a really spectacular show of Dingda McCannon's work, her first solo show at a commercial gallery ever. She's in her 60s or 70s, I believe. And then they also had a solo booth of her work in Miami Beach. So there's really just like powerful, figurative, textile-based, very imaginative, but also sort of rooted in portraiture work. There's an upcoming Faith Ringgold retrospective at the New Museum. There's just, I feel like between sort of textile and ceramics, and then also the very kind of like worked, layered paint, there's just a lot of tactile and very kind of vibrant textural work. I could go on. There's the weaver Diedrich Brackens has really had a standout year, as has Billy Zangewa, the South African textile artist. The American ceramics artist Khalil Robert Irving has this really sort of fantastic suite of ceramic works right at one of the main kind of entrances to the New Museum Triennial. These really intricate works where he kind of like transfers photos onto ceramics, but then also incorporates found objects. They're out of this world. So I think that's kind of maybe the big overarching trend that I've been most aware of this year. I think the other two, which are maybe not specific to 2021 so much, but I really do think the trend of figurative painting, and specifically figurative painting by artists of color, has really not shown any signs of slowing. I think from every kind of contemporary evening auction to every major fair, it's sort of just as unavoidable as it has been this year. And there's certainly no sign of kind of collector appetite drying up for that work either. I think the British Nigerian artist Joy Labinjo has had kind of both on the primary and secondary market just an incredible year, with her auction record broken multiple times, and really fantastic solo booth at I believe it was the Armory show that sold out very quickly with Tawani Contemporary. The New York-based British artist Tunji Adeni Jones has similarly had both on the primary and secondary markets just a really phenomenal year with sort of incredibly beautiful sort of Matissean figures and kind of floral settings. Obviously, the Ghanaian painter Otis Kwame Kai Kweko, who had a residency at the Rubel Museum. There's again, I feel like I could go on. There's Dominic Chambers has really had a stunning year. Archimonaro Niles joined up with Leon Maupin Gallery earlier this year. Jamie Holmes has had his auction record broken multiple times over. So I think that trend, which really started to kind of gain steam in like 2019 and into 2020, is really still going strong. And then I guess the third one, which to me is kind of almost in opposition to the figurative painting trend, is a kind of slow but palpable kind of reappreciation of abstraction, which I quite like. I mean, I definitely think my taste trends more towards figuration, but it's nice to have a bit of a balance in the market, which has been so figuration obsessed for the last couple of years. But I think there's some really fantastic artists who work in abstraction have had a pretty phenomenal year. The British painter Jade Thadojutimi, I think is kind of like the obvious sensation in this category. I feel like in the fall auction season, her auction record was being broken sort of every other day. But her kind of really beautiful, large-scale gestural abstraction is really sort of really stands out in an evening auction where every other work is a portrait. So yeah, I think her work has been kind of at the forefront of that wave of renewed appreciation for abstraction. But then there's also there's artists like Anna Pendleton, who's been doing text-based work for years and had a really big installation in the atrium at MoMA this year. The American artist Alterante Gumby has been getting a lot of attention with these really just beautiful, kind of like almost light and space works that incorporate glass and are just sort of sublime. I could go on, but I think that there's an interesting kind of reevaluation, maybe, of abstraction after many years of a kind of single-minded focus on figuration, which I think is interesting and maybe even healthy.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think you did a great job identifying some of the key trends in terms of art being made in 2021. And it is nice to see some more abstract art being made in the last year. It's refreshing. I think figurative art's becoming a little bit saturated and people are ready for some variety. So if we shift to exhibitions and shows over the last year, what were a few of your favorite exhibitions?
Sure. I have a long running list that I keep throughout the year, but I've tried to whittle it down to 5 that really stick out in my mind. The first of which was this really fantastic exhibition at Pace, actually, in I think it was like late winter, early spring. Zanelli Moholy curated an exhibition of David Goldblatt photographs. So there's a really just like, David Goldblatt's work is fantastic, and as is Zanelli Moholy's. And interestingly, David Goldblatt was a mentor and friend of Zanelli Moholy's. So they, had a dialogue before he passed away, and it really came across in the show. So the show is called Strange Instrument, and it was just you could just tell that Zanelli Moholy had sort of spent so much time with Goldblatt's work, And it was a very, not pared down exactly, but it wasn't a kind of, David Goldblatt has a huge body of work documenting, South Africa during and post apartheid. And it was, and there was a fantastic retrospective of him at the New Museum in 2009, I think. But this show was like very pared down, and it was very sort of like you could get the sense almost that Zanele Mahali was making these very kind of like intuitive connections, really grouping the work thematically, and it was just like a beautifully hung and beautifully organized exhibition, and it really painted this kind of it offered this very kind of lived-in snapshot of life in South Africa under apartheid, and it was really that was a really stunning exhibition. So that's definitely a highlight. Another one for me was the Shed in also in New York. Had I guess I don't know if it was technically a retrospective or a survey, but a major and very overdue Howardina Pindell exhibition, Rope, Fire, Water, which I'm cheating a little because this opened in late 2020, but continued into March 2021. So this was definitely a highlight of my year. Howardina Pindell is best known for these kind of large scale works on kind of unstretched and often shaped canvas that incorporate glitter and collage elements and sort of hole punch paper, little circles of colorful paper, and they have this real sort of like talk about textural work. They're just you can kind of get lost in the details, but then they'll also have these very very intense and very poignant collage elements that come in and really are often addressing issues of race and gender and exclusion, and they're very kind of like very powerful contrast between this sort of lyrical abstraction and this very very intense figurative content. And this show was sort of the epitome of that. There was all these really beautiful works of hers, very like a lot of the abstract hole punched and glittered works, and then 3 new pieces, including 2 new sort of wall-based installations that were just like kind of a gut punch, really addressing very bluntly episodes of racist violence in the US. And it was just like it was sort of like being, you just turned the corner and had your breath kind of knocked out of you. It was really a really powerful show. So that was definitely a highlight for me. Another was the El Museo del Barrio has a triennial exhibition that should have happened last year, but obviously was postponed to this year. Estamos Bien was the title, and we're good. And it was absolutely fantastic. I mean, it is a triennial with more than 40 artists from kind of across the US and Puerto Rico, and so understandably kind of uneven, but the share of work that was really kind of surprising and powerful and outstanding was really really stunning. So that was absolutely one of my favorites. They had ceramic works by Roberto Lugo, who makes these really kind of politically apt, often sort of vases that incorporate portraiture in the glazing, that are really stunning, I think. And there were also a bunch of artists who I hadn't really known prior to the show, so it was also a really great occasion to discover new work by new artists. This artist Victoria Gitman, for instance, makes these like incredible little trompe-l'oeil paintings of sequins, and I swear I think there were 2 of them in the show. I could have sworn that they were actual sequins when I walked up to the painting. It was so so incredibly effective. This artist Eddie R. Aparicio makes these incredible mixed media kind of I guess I don't know if you'd call them tapestries exactly, but they're sort of textile-like, although often incorporate leather, mixed media hangings. And the one in the El Museo Triennial was had kind of pieces of broken bottles attached to it, and was just like incredibly delicate, but also incredibly kind of violent piece. And it was really you had to sort of like move around it to see every side of it, and it was really very powerful. But again, there's just a lot of really strong work. There was this really powerful mural by Carolina Caicedo commemorating activists who were killed in a struggle for environmental justice, primarily in Latin America. That was really quite moving. There's this insane and very kind of very on the nose digital video and kind of wallpaper installation by Michael Menchaca, really sort of speaking to the political divisiveness of our times and how we experience everything through our phones. That was really kind of delightful and terrifying at the same time. So just a lot of really great work in the El Museo Triennial this year. And then, yeah, another one was the Leslie Lohman Museum in Soho in Manhattan had a retrospective of Laura Aguilar, who died a few years ago, but who made sort of really brave and powerful photo and video work. And this exhibition, which was titled Show and Tell, was really phenomenal and just very bracing. You got a really great sense of her evolution from making this like somewhat politically overt work, kind of incorporating like the U.S. flag and making these very kind of blunt statements about the state of the culture. Kind of earlier in her career, to making this very kind of introspective, almost diaristic, but very raw work about her own life and her own identity as a Latina woman, but as also a queer person, and really sort of struggling with the kind of weight of those identities. And that was just like a really stunning exhibition, and it was also one of those exhibitions. I feel like I have this feeling a few times a year where I see a show at a smaller museum and think to myself, like, why hasn't the Whitney or MoMA done the sort of full scale version of this? Because this really merits it. And I think Laura Aguilar is absolutely in that category. And the last show I'll mention is, and this is sort of by happenstance almost that this happened, but I was on vacation with my partner in New Mexico at the end of the summer in August, and we visited the Museum of International Folk Art in Santa Fe, which is, first of all, just a fantastic museum. If you're ever in New Mexico, I highly recommend. But one of their temporary exhibitions was a show called From Combat to Carpet, The Art of Afghan War Rugs. And we happened to be there, about 10 days after the Taliban took over Afghanistan again. And so it was just like the sort of climate of the moment was kind of added to the intensity of the show, but it was just a phenomenal exhibition of these Afghan war rugs, which are rugs, some of which were actually made to sell to U.S. soldiers stationed in Afghanistan, but also for Afghanis, and they're these kind of figurative versions of kind of ornate Afghan rugs with things like tanks and helicopters and machine guns, and some of them are maps of the U.S. or dating back to the Soviet invasion. There was one that was kind of a map of Afghanistan and the Soviet Union, and there was one depicting 9/11. There's just these incredibly intense, and kind of all the more intense because they're, in a sense, domestic objects. Just these really beautiful figurative rugs, but that you can also kind of almost can't imagine living with one, but they are just very powerful. And to see them in the context of of Afghanistan falling back to the Taliban was really grim in a way, or all the more grim because you could sort of see the history repeating itself. Yeah. So those are my 5 kind of top shows, but I'll be spending the next 10 days or so thinking a little more about filling out my top 10 for 2021.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your most memorable exhibitions. It was very diverse, and reflecting back on 2021, I think it's great that everyone had an opportunity to see art again in person. I think COVID really reminded us just what a vast difference it is between consuming art on our phones versus experiencing it in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably all of us had some version of the experience of finally going back to a museum for the first time in maybe late 2020 or early 2021, and just sort of having that kind of like transcendental, right, like art in person. This is the thing I've been missing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So lastly, before we let you go, it's a tradition here on the podcast during this end of the year episode that we end it with asking our guests for a bold prediction for the upcoming year. So if you could, please indulge us and share a bold prediction for the art market in 2022. We won't hold it against you if it doesn't come true, but what do you got for us?
Well, thank you. That's charitable of you. I have 2, one of which is maybe less risky than the other. So I figured I would hedge my bets by going with one that seems somewhat more secure. My low risk prediction then is that auction houses, galleries, and artists are really gonna dive into the metaverse. I think we're already seeing this, so it's not maybe not the most kind of controversial prediction, but given the speed with which artists and galleries and auction houses last year went from kind of dismissing NFTs to embracing them, I think the metaverse is kind of this space that just has like this huge online built-in community and audience, and B, can serve as a kind of platform for showcasing NFTs in a kind of less awkward context than how they've tended to be presented so far, which is on sort of fancy Samsung screens in galleries and fair booths, which is fine, but it sort of never quite seems ideal. But I think we're going to see a lot more artists and art market players kind of testing out what they can do in the metaverse, and we're starting to see that a little bit. Sotheby's already created its own kind of metaverse platform for showing digital art. Starting to see a couple of artist projects embracing the metaverse. Stan Douglas, the photographer, has done a project with the Toledo Art Museum that kind of like takes one of his videos and turns it into a kind of like immersive narrative in a metaverse space. So I think we're starting to see the beginnings of that. But I think it'll be interesting to see that take off in 2022, and to what extent, as with NFTs, we start to see kind of non-digital artists testing out that space. So that's that. I mean, we'll see where we are a year from now, and maybe what felt like a conservative prediction will actually turn out to have been very wrong. But that seems very within the realm of possibility to me. But in case that's not bold enough, my other prediction is that that we're going to see some sort of crossover between the art market and the space tourism industry. I feel like these two worlds, literally and figuratively took off.
You said the space tourism industry.
Yes. Yeah.
I love this. Okay. Yeah. Go. Yeah. Extrapolate on this. This is great. This is more bold. I like it.
Yeah. Well, I think the art market and the space tourism industry were really bolstered this year by just the amount of wealth that was created for the wealthiest in the world over the past year and a half. And they're looking for ways to spend their money, and I think space tourism is really the kind of epitome of a kind of experiential purchase. whereas blue chip art is kind of the ultimate kind of like status and to some extent kind of investment or asset purchase. But I think because both markets are kind of chasing after a similar class of ultra high net worth individuals, I feel like there's got to be some kind of crossover in the coming year. We almost got it with Yasuku Maezawa, the Japanese collector who bought the $110 million Basquiat, who had initially pledged that he was going to bring artists with him to the moon aboard a SpaceX rocket. That hasn't happened, but he did go to the International Space Station earlier this month, actually, aboard a Russian rocket with his business partner. So yeah, we didn't quite get the art space tourism crossover yet there, but I do think it's going to happen. I don't know in what form it'll be. I could see a world where especially as Sotheby's and Christie's have kind of been experimenting with dropping somewhat incongruous lots into the middle of a major evening art sale. Maybe we'll see a SpaceX or Blue Origin trip auctioned off in the middle of an evening sale. Maybe one of the auction houses will send one of their top auctioneers up into space to run a sale from the International Space Station. Again, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. Maybe Elon Musk will spend some of his Tesla money to buy a major stake in Sotheby's if they go public next year. There's any number of crossovers, but I think something is going to happen in that space.
Well, I love this prediction, and we're gonna have to see if this bold one comes true. But yeah, I like your creativity with coming up with some of those ideas. So Ben, thanks so much for coming on the podcast and really helping us recap 2021. It was a very eventful year, and a lot of interesting trends emerged from it. If our listeners want to follow you on social and see any of your writings in the art newspaper, where can we find you?
The best place to find my writing is theartnewspaper.com. On Twitter, I'm BH Sutton. And on Instagram, I'm It's Ben Sutton. Those are the best places to follow me.
Perfect. Ben, thanks so much for coming on. Have a great holiday season and New Year, and we'll speak to you in 2022. Thanks,
Adam. You too. And really, it was a real pleasure to come on and look back at the year. So thanks again.
We want to thank ArtBase for sponsoring this week's episode of the ArtTactic Podcast. Are you managing an art collection, an artist, studio, or gallery? Is it time to bring your collection management skills up to a professional level? Well, ArtBase is the right software to manage your art business. ArtBase allows you to track your artworks and contacts in an easy-to-use, powerful database. All you do is enter your data once, and you use that data to generate reports, offers, contracts, and a bunch more. They've got a brand new version out with a whole new look that can be used in the cloud from any location on any device. So go to artbase.com now to learn more, and be sure to mention ArtTactic for a 15% discount.